Welcome to In the Zone TV. I'm your special host, Edward Preston, here with Eric Schein, and we're going to get to the roots as to why he's been persecuted and prosecuted unfairly and unjustly as a whistleblower. He is in the Merchant Marines, and we're going to get to that right here, right now, with Eric Schein. Eric, why is it that in trying to expose the truth about injustice in a system like the Merchant Marines, it has brought upon you so many difficulties in your life?
Well, a big part of it is because the democratic institutions, like our courts or arbitration, have been taken down intentionally, so that basically all of our rights or entitlements, whether they're contractual or constitutional or even inalienable human rights, to some extent are now, by this administration and the corporations, being given back to us as privileges. And they're only given out as privileges if you behave and do what the corporations ask. And to the point of to where it's almost, prison planet or global gulag, to where they're using very many of the same systems that were used in the prison and death camps in Nazi Germany, and they're applying it on both the governmental side and even the corporate side to deny and even put in positions of power and trust or authority individuals who do not have a problem in violating the Constitution, violating the rule of law, violating those inalienable rights, to the point, like in my own situation, they violated the fundamental core principle of the separation of powers. The executive branch brought civil complaint or a counter complaint against me on top of, and so as to injure and quash my civil complaints involving the shipping companies, which are a very special type of federal contractor. They sign general agency agreements and become an arm or branch or agency of the United States government, and the Federal Officers Association, which is much like a police officers association, but in this instance it's a federal contractor, a very special type, that also signs general agency agreements. And they're taking federal funds, federal monies paid out in trust, to institute these and maintain these enormous private, or not private, but federal trusts to pay for, provide, and provision for our American flag merchant marine, to the point now where 97% of the vessels are now foreign flag. They've outsourced it, and this gets into the system of fractionalization, which applies to our banking system and more, that they can no longer afford to, as far as they see it, because the system has become so corrupted and there's so many levels of corruption, that they can no longer pay American federal maritime officers or American merchant seamen, so they have to go to a third world country like, say, China or other countries. And you've seen what's happened to China. It's not much of a third world country anymore. It's become a powerhouse. But in my own situation, they've done such things as put out a bolo. These are the personal attacks, attacking the messenger so as to kill the message.
Well, before you get into that, take us back to the beginning. Where did this all start? Because I'm sure you did not decide, hey, I want to be a whistleblower when you were a kid. You perhaps decided later on in your life that you wanted to be, a member of the Merchant Marines.
Well, I went
so take it from there and then bring us up to the present time.
My father went to West Point. He attended there. He didn't graduate from there. He actually graduated from Northeastern University, University of San Diego, PhD, master's. He worked for General Dynamics as eventually as a director of ethics, and also as the vice president of engineering. He had a civil engineering degree and more. He worked on space shuttle, all sorts of things. My brother did go to West Point, graduate from there. My uncle went to Annapolis, graduated from there. We've had a long history of not only federal and or military, but public service. And I saw that, Kings Point, I actually applied to the Naval Academy and got into the Merchant Marine Academy. Didn't know much about it. After I checked it out, saw what it was all about, I thought it was a pretty good deal and, couldn't pass it up. It's a $180,000 education paid for by the federal government, by the taxpayers, much like West Point or Annapolis. It is a sister academy to West Point or Annapolis. And coming out, I just wanted to work as a federal maritime officer doing what I was trained to do. Not only do I come out with a naval commission, a top secret security clearance, embedded in the industry to protect it from labor racketeering, smuggling, other forms of racketeering or insurance fraud and more, but even our levels and type of training have been, I'd say, downgraded to, rather than being officers on special duty within the Merchant Marine. Not only has the Merchant Marine disappeared effectively or been outsourced, but to the point where the Coast Guard, it's a sister agency or department. Coast Guard has its own academy. Merchant Marine has its own academy called Kings Point. And what's happened is the Coast Guard is actively involved in literally shutting down our own Merchant Marine and outsourcing it by going after, through regulatory means and even personnel actions. In my own situation, I'm not in the Coast Guard. I went to a separate and distinct federal and military service academy, Naval Commission and more. The Department of Homeland Security, which is and has become this uber agency, and it's acting much more like the Gestapo of Nazi Germany or the Stasi. And what's happened is they are going after anyone who complains, speaks up, finds out more about certain corruptions. This all started out relatively simply, but it turned, I guess, made a mountain out of a molehill. And now, the United States of America, Department of Homeland Security, Department of Transportation, U.S. Coast Guard have actually brought charges against me in the face of DOT Inspector General cases, which were complaints brought by me in the face of complaints to the FBI in San Diego, and you've seen how they've been involved in all sorts of things in San Diego. The U.S. Attorney's Office in San Diego also got involved. Carol C. Lamb and her offices got involved, and also Timothy Stutler.
But give me a specific example, your first experience that you said, hey, there's something wrong here, I have to speak up about this.
Well, when I first came into and started to work through the shipping halls, through this Federal Officers Association, again, it's much like a police officers association, it's also a federal contractor, there was vying factions that was the result of investigations with the Department of Justice, Department of Labor, FBI and others into labor racketeering, where people actually went to jail. They were trying to attack these enormous federal trusts. So when I came out of school, graduated in '91, they were actually holding and fighting over control because, custody or possession is 9/10 of the law, supposedly. And there was a legal battle and more going on at the time, to where the union halls or shipping halls, and it's not really a union, it is referred to, but it's not, it's a Federal Officers Association, were actually being held with baseball bats. And that's like gangs of New York. That's like the 1800s, the Molly Maguires and more. Fist is another example, a visual example that people may have seen the movie with
Sylvester
Stallone.
Yeah.
Right. And what's going on now is that the corporations, they're using, like Blackwater USA, much like the Pinkertons and others, Wackenhut and more, to literally go after Americans, whether they be railroadmen, merchant seamen, or federal maritime officers like myself, truckers and more, to basically subjugate everyone in every industry. It doesn't matter if you're a doctor, lawyer, nurse, engineer. They're using licenses and licensing as a leash or a chain, so that if you speak up, you complain, they use that license to come after you and counter-prosecute you under these licensing proceedings that are totally inappropriate. I'm not in the Coast Guard. I'm not a Coast Guard officer, but I'm being held in administrative proceedings of the U.S. Coast Guard for the last 4 years and detained. And when you think, they actually had me in a hotel room for 8 months while they're prosecuting me for, quote unquote, being depressed, seizing medical records, falsifying medical records. They put out a BOLO on me, or a be on the lookout, which is like a wanted or warning poster. Even under FOIA, Freedom of Information Act requests, I tried to get copies of the evidence that they're using against me. I even asked the administrative law judge, this Parlin L. McKenna, and he's not a real judge, he's an executive officer from the executive branch, to read into the record what the charges against me were, and he refused to do it, ended the quote-unquote proceedings, and issued a summary judgment saying that I was quote-unquote medically and mentally incompetent somehow.
So what were the steps that you first took that they felt that you crossed the line and that you were no longer with them but were against them? Did you verbally make a complaint? Did you?
Well, I'm not with or against anyone. I'm with
well,
and
I'm saying,
for. Well, no,
as
no,
far
here,
as the way that they're treating
that.
you is not
but
as if you're doing the right thing.
But I'm not
as a
with,
whistleblower.
again, I'm not with or for anyone. I'm with and for the rule of law under the Constitution, Declaration of Independence, Bill of Rights, and more. And I abhor I'm a Republican, went to a military academy. These tyrants who have taken over our government have every intent on bringing it down through planned obsolescence, the war in Iraq, war in Afghanistan, soon to be Iran, and more, almost exactly like they did to the German Republic, the Weimar Republic that turned into Nazi Germany. That wasn't to take over the world, that was to implode the, quote unquote republic and or the empire, so that everything within and without could be stolen by these administrative pirates who were carrying this on from within the executive branch and even from within Congress and the judicial branch. But they did, let me throw out real quick, think about it. They could have charged me with being a witch and proven it when they're stealing medical records and personnel records, falsifying medical records. They even said at one point, and this is, this is coming off an MMPI-2, which is a Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Index. It's a bunch of hooey and a witch doctor test, if you ask me. But on it, it has a page of flag questions on the back of it. And on it, it says very clearly on the top, and if you can read, which the Coast Guard cannot, it says clearly only the questions highlighted in bold are flag questions or are positive for this test or whatever. But it puts all the questions there. But if somebody can't just simply read the top and understand that, if they're just in normal type, then no problem. They went in and used them as if I had answered many of these flag questions positive. And some of them said that, evil spirits possess me at times somehow, which I never said. I answered it false. They went ahead and falsified that and tried to say that somehow I said that evil spirits possess me at times. And it's like utterly ridiculous, but that's how far they will go to injure other people, lie, cheat, and steal to the point they do not care about any other individual. They do not care about the rule of law. These people are dangerous. They are rogue agents operating within our federal government, within these corporations and more, and they have every intent to do as much harm as possible, not only to this country, but our people and the people of the world. And they must be taken out and also isolated so that people, whether they're involved in my own situation or situations with other whistleblowers or even simple complainants, whether it's a class action suit, when you get into court, which is supposed to be a public trust, where you're protected, this is supposed to be a safe haven, whether if you're a little party, one individual going up against GE, you should have a right to get heard. Not only seek redress, but actually find redress. But what's happened is because of the size of government and because of the size of the corporations, an individual has little, if no chance of actually getting heard on their grievances, let alone finding proper redress. And you can see this going on across the board, whether it's a political dissident, just a simple union like a grievance or whatever, or a federal officer for a grievance, or civil complaints. But they also went ahead and seized upon my civil complaints in violation of the separation of powers, seized my homes. I was told to, quote unquote, put a gun to my head and blow myself away in the midst of all this, hoping that I could be so despondent, so depressed from what's going on that I might actually do that. They held me in a hotel room for 8 months as they prosecuted me for being depressed, seized medical records, falsified medical records. I had no chance of actually seeing the evidence against me, even though in defense, I filed their own evidence that they were supposed to bring in. I never got to see it, and I couldn't get a copy of it or see what was being held against me, and the administrative law judge or the United States would not actually even present the charges against me.
And the goal in all this is ultimately them hoping that you go away.
Right.
And that they don't have to address things, because this will open a can of worms which starts to expose a lot of the fraud and a lot of the flawedness of the system, if you will. And this is something that they want to keep under cover.
Well, they want to blame the injured party, just like we've talked about a specialist Town who, he got blown up by a 107 millimeter rocket, and all of a sudden somehow it's his fault. They discharge him from the military, and so they can steal his pension, benefits, and more.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. We're talking with whistleblower Eric Shine, and this is In the Zone TV. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.